They called her useless, barren, powerless, barely worth the scraps she ate. But when the mighty Alpha King lay dying from a poison no healer could touch, it was her trembling hand that made the ancient venom recoil in terror, revealing the truth they'd all been too blind to see. The weakest wolf in the kingdom carried a gift so dangerous. Her own body had locked it away. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The air in Castle Valerian tasted like fear. Lyrian could smell it even from the kitchens, sharp and acrid, threading through the stone corridors like smoke from a dying fire. It clung to the guards who rushed past without seeing her, to the servants who whispered in tight clusters, to the very walls that had stood for centuries and now seemed to tremble. The Alpha King was dying. She clutched the wooden tray tighter, her knuckles white against the grain as she pressed herself into the shadowed alcove beside the hearth. No one noticed her there. They never did. She was small, slight, her presence so unremarkable that even in a room full of people, she might as well have been invisible. Useless, Matron Corva had called her that morning, the word falling from the older woman's lips as casually as a yawn. Can't even carry a tray without shaking. What good is an Omega who can't bear children and can't manage simple tasks? Lyrian had said nothing. She'd learned years ago that silence was safer than defense. But now, listening to the frantic footsteps echoing through the halls, the shouted orders from the council chambers, the low keening howl that rose from somewhere deep in the castle, she felt something crack open inside her chest. Eric Thorne was dying. The Alpha King, silver-eyed, broad-shouldered, fierce in battle yet gentle when he thought no one was watching. The wolf who had once helped her gather broken goblets when she'd dropped an entire tray at his feet during the spring feast. She'd been mortified, certain he would strike her or banish her from service, but instead he'd knelt beside her, his massive hands carefully picking up shards of glass. "These things happen," he'd said, his voice low and warm. "Don't let them see you bleed, though. Cuts from glass are stubborn." He'd smiled then, a rare thing, a private thing, and for just a moment, Lyrian had felt seen. She'd never forgotten it. Now he was dying, and the greatest healers in the realm couldn't save him. "Make way." A healer stumbled past, robes billowing, face pale and drawn. Behind him came two guards dragging a hunched figure wrapped in furs, a shaman, perhaps, or a witch. Lyrian couldn't tell. The figure muttered something that sounded like a prayer or a curse, then cackled and went silent. The castle had become a parade of the desperate and the delusional. "Step aside, step aside." Another healer swept through, this one waving a bundle of smoking herbs so thick that Lyrian's eyes watered. "Moowort and silverleaf, if this doesn't cleanse him, nothing will." Spoiler, it wouldn't. Lyrian knew because she'd been listening. The poison inside the king wasn't ordinary. It was nightworm venom, ancient, sentient, woven by witches who died before kingdoms had names. It didn't just kill. It consumed. It wrapped around an alpha's healing like a serpent and squeezed until there was nothing left but ash and silence. She'd heard the elders speaking of it in hushed tones near the storerooms earlier, their voices thick with dread. If Eric dies, the northern clans will strike within days. The council will fracture. Every rival alpha will circle like vultures. "We're finished." Lyrian had pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering as they passed. They hadn't seen her. They never did. But she'd heard enough to know the truth. Without the Alpha King, the kingdom would fall. And no one seemed able to stop it. She didn't remember deciding to move. One moment she was standing in the alcove, tray forgotten on the stones beside her. The next, her feet were carrying her down the corridor, past the frantic guards and shouting nobles, toward the royal wing where she had no business being. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "Turn back. You'll be punished. You'll be thrown out. You'll..." But she didn't turn back. Because somewhere deep inside her, buried beneath years of insults and dismissal, beneath the weight of being called barren and useless and weak, was a pull. A certainty. A whisper that sounded like her own voice, but older, wiser, ancient. You can help him. It made no sense. She was an Omega. She had no healing gift, no mystical talent, no strength worth naming. She couldn't even carry a tray without trembling. But the pull was relentless. So she walked. The royal wing was chaos. Healers shouted over one another, guards blocked doorways, and an ancient wolf with braided eyebrows, Elder Harith, she realized with a jolt, stood in the center of the hall, chanting something that sounded like it predated language itself. No one looked at Lyrian as she slipped past. No one saw the small, trembling Omega in the patched dress moving like a shadow toward the Alpha King's chamber. The door was unguarded, everyone too distracted by the commotion to notice, and Lyrian's hand found the iron handle before she could think better of it. She pushed. The door opened, and the world inside stole her breath. The chamber was vast, the ceiling lost in shadows despite the roaring fire in the hearth. Tapestries hung from the walls, depicting battles and bloodlines, victories and legends. But none of it mattered. Because on the floor, sprawled across cold stone despite the furs and blankets scattered nearby, lay Eric Thorne, the Alpha King. Dying. Lyrian's knees nearly buckled. He was still in his armor, dark leather and silver plates, now loosened and askew. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored gasps. His silver hair, usually tied back, spilled across his face in damp strands. And his eyes, those fierce, commanding eyes, were closed. Beside him, a massive wolf lay curled protectively, its silver fur streaked with gray, blue eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. The wolf's gaze snapped to Lyrian the moment she stepped inside, and for a heartbeat, she thought it might lunge. Instead, it whimpered. A sound so broken, so full of grief, that Lyrian felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she didn't know why. I shouldn't be here. The wolf didn't move. Didn't growl. Just watched her with those ancient, knowing eyes. Lyrian took a step forward. Then another. Her hands were shaking, when weren't they, but she forced herself to kneel beside the king, the cold stone biting through the thin fabric of her dress. Up close, she could see it. The poison. It moved beneath his skin like something alive, black veins crawling up his neck, across his jaw, pulsing faintly with a sickly green light. It was coiled around his heart, she realized with horror. Squeezing. Strangling. Killing him slowly. Your Majesty, she breathed, though he couldn't hear her. Her hand hovered over his chest, trembling so hard she thought she might drop it. Don't touch him. You'll make it worse. You'll. But the pull was stronger now. Insistent. Urgent. Touch him. So she did. The moment her palm made contact with his skin, the world exploded. The poison recoiled. Lyrian gasped as the black veins beneath Eric's skin writhed violently, pulling away from her hand as if she were made of fire and of shadow. A faint light, soft, golden, ancient, ignited beneath her palm, spreading outward in slow, rippling waves. The wolf beside her growled, not in warning, but in recognition. And Eric's eyes snapped open. Silver. Sharp. Blazing. They locked onto hers. Who? His voice was a rasp, broken and raw. Who are you? Lyrian, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I know I shouldn't be here. I know I. The poison shrieked. It was the only word for it. A sound that wasn't a sound, a vibration that rattled her bones and made the firelight flicker. The black veins surged upward, fighting against her light, clawing toward Eric's heart with renewed fury. He arched off the floor, a guttural cry tearing from his throat. No. Lyrian pressed both hands against his chest, the light flaring brighter, hotter. No, you don't get to take him. She didn't know where the words came from. Didn't know where the light came from. Didn't know anything except that if she let go, Eric Thorne would die. And she couldn't let that happen. The poison bucked like a wild animal, slamming against her light, trying to break through. Lyrian's entire body shook, her vision blurring, her lungs screaming for air she couldn't seem to draw. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. The wolf howled, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the chamber like a prayer. And then, with a final, piercing shriek, the poison shattered. It fled from Eric's body like smoke fleeing the sun, dissipating into the air with a hiss that made Lyrian's skin crawl. The black veins faded. The sickly green light vanished. And Eric collapsed onto the floor, breathing deep, steady breaths. Alive. Lyrian sagged forward, her hands still pressed against his chest, her entire body trembling so violently she thought she might fall apart. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. How? Before she could think, before she could move, a large, warm hand closed gently around her wrist. Eric's hand. His grip was weak, but steady. His silver eyes, though exhausted, were focused entirely on her. "Don't go," he murmured, his voice barely more than a breath. Lyrian's heart stuttered. Stay." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. And before she could respond, before she could process what had just happened, the doors to the chamber burst open. Guards poured into the chamber like a flood, armor clanking, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in a cacophony of shock and confusion. Behind them came the healers, the elders, the nobles, all of them shoving and jostling to see what had happened. They froze. Every single one of them. Because there, on the cold stone floor of the royal chamber, lay their Alpha King alive, breathing steadily, his chest rising and falling with color returned to his face, and cradled against him was Lyrian. The Barren Omega. The useless girl from the kitchens whose name most of them didn't even know. Her hands still glowed faintly with golden light. "What in the name of the first wolves?" Elder Rovin's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He was a towering man, gray-bearded and battle-scarred, with eyes that could freeze blood. "What is she doing here? How did she get past the guards?" another elder demanded. Did she hurt him?" The accusations flew like arrows, each one sharper than the last. Lyrian tried to pull away, tried to shrink back into herself the way she always did, but Eric's hand tightened around her wrist. Not painfully, just firmly, anchoring her. "Everyone out." His voice was hoarse, barely more than a rasp, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The room went silent. "Your Majesty, you need out." Eric pushed himself upright slowly, painfully, but the movement was enough. The wolf beside him rose as well, blue eyes blazing, teeth bared in a silent warning that needed no translation. The healers hesitated. The elders bristled. But no one argued. Not with their king. Elder Rovin was the last to leave, his gaze lingering on Lyrian with something that looked uncomfortably like suspicion. Or perhaps calculation. She couldn't tell. The door shut with a heavy thud, and the chamber fell into silence once more. Lyrian's heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. She was alone with the Alpha King. Oh gods. Oh gods, what have I done? Eric released her wrists slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might startle her. He leaned back against the stone, his breathing still labored, and studied her with those piercing silver eyes. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Lyrian shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know what I did. I shouldn't have been here. I'm sorry. I'll leave, Stop." The word was gentle but firm. "Look at me." She did. And immediately wished she hadn't. Because the way he was looking at her, like she was something precious, something important, made her chest ache in ways she didn't understand. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyrian, Your Majesty. Lyrian." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "How long have you been in the castle?" 7 years, my lord." His brow furrowed. 7 years. "And I've never—" He trailed off, but she knew what he meant. "And I've never noticed you. No one ever did." "You're an Omega," he said, though it wasn't a question. "Yes, my lord." "And you?" He glanced down at his chest, where the poison had been coiled just moments before, where her hands had glowed with impossible light. "You have healing magic." "No." The word came out too fast, too desperate. "I don't. I can't." But even as she spoke, she felt the lie of it. Because something had happened. Something she couldn't explain, couldn't rationalize, couldn't ignore. The light had come from her. The poison had fled from her. She had saved the Alpha King when no one else could. Eric watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. She flinched not from fear, but from shock. No one touched her. Ever. She was too low, too unimportant, too. His thumb brushed across her palm, and the faint glow returned. Just a flicker. A spark. But undeniable. Lyrian gasped. You feel that? Eric's voice was soft, almost reverent. She nodded, unable to speak. That's not normal healing magic, he said. That's older. Stronger. He looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd entered the chamber, she saw something other than exhaustion in his eyes. She saw awe. What are you, Lyrian? I don't know, she whispered. I swear, I don't know. Before he could respond, the wolf, silent until now, padded closer and pressed its massive head against Lyrian's shoulder. She stiffened, unsure if it meant comfort or warning, but the creature simply huffed and settled beside her, as if claiming her as pack. Eric smiled faintly. Kale likes you. That's rare. Kale. My spirit wolf. We've been bonded since I was a boy. He reached out and scratched behind the wolf's ears, his movements still slow and careful. He's an excellent judge of character. Lyrian didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Eric spoke again. They're going to come back soon, he said. The elders. The council. And they're going to want answers. Lyrian's stomach twisted. I'll tell them the truth. That I don't know what happened. They won't believe you. His tone was blunt but not unkind. They'll think you're lying. Or worse, they'll think you're dangerous. I'm not. I know. He squeezed her hand gently. But they don't. And fear makes people cruel. She knew that all too well. What do I do? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Eric was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, thoughtful. Then he looked at her again, and something in his expression shifted. Hardened. Resolved. You stay with me, he said. Lyrian blinked. What? As my healer. He hesitated, as if searching for the right word. My ward. Under my protection. They won't dare touch you if you're under royal decree. But I'm not a healer. I don't know anything about. You saved my life when the greatest healers in the realm couldn't. His voice was firm now, leaving no room for argument. That makes you the most valuable healer in this kingdom. Whether you understand your power or not. Her throat tightened. They'll never accept it. You're not just anything. The words came out sharp, almost fierce. Not anymore. And the way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, made something crack open inside her chest. Something she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten it was there. Hope. The door opened again before she could respond. This time, only Elder Rovan entered, his expression carefully neutral. He bowed, shallow, perfunctory, and fixed his gaze on Eric. Your Majesty. The council requests an audience. Tomorrow, Eric said coolly. I need rest. They insist. Tomorrow. The Alpha's voice dropped into a growl that made even Rovan pause. Or are you suggesting I'm not fit to make my own decisions? Rovan's jaw tightened, but he bowed again. Of course not, my lord. Tomorrow, then. His gaze flicked to Lyrian, cold and assessing. And the girl. The girl, Eric said slowly, deliberately, stays with me. By royal decree, she is now under my direct protection as the king's personal healer. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or so much as speaks to her with disrespect will answer to me personally. The room went deathly silent. Rovan's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough to betray his shock. My lord, surely you don't mean. I mean exactly what I said. Eric's tone was ice. Spread the word, elder. Lyrian is untouchable. For a moment, Lyrian thought Rovan might argue. Might protest. Might do something to stop this madness. But he simply bowed again, deeper this time, and left without another word. The door shut. And Lyrian realized, with a dizzying mix of terror and disbelief, that her life had just changed forever. She turned to Eric, her voice shaking. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He met her gaze steadily. Because if I hadn't, They would have torn you apart trying to figure out what you are. And I won't let that happen. But why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Eric was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled, a small, tired thing, but genuine. You helped me pick up broken glass once, he said softly. At the spring feast. You dropped a tray and I knelt beside you to help. Do you remember? Lyrian's breath caught. You remember that? I remember thinking you looked terrified. Like you expected the world to punish you for a simple mistake. His expression softened. I remember wishing I could tell you it didn't have to be that way. Tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. I also remember, he continued, his voice dropping lower, that you were the only person in that entire hall who looked at me like I was just a man. Not a king. Not a weapon. Just someone. Her heart twisted. So yes, Lyrian, he said quietly. I care. Because you saved my life. And because... He hesitated, then smiled again. Because Kale likes you. And he's never wrong. The wolf huffed, as if in agreement. Despite everything, despite the fear and the confusion and the impossibility of it all, Lyrian felt a smile tug at her lips. What happens now? She asked. Eric leaned back against the stone, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Now? You rest. Tomorrow, we face the council. And after that. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his silver eyes. After that, we figure out what you are. And why the poison was so afraid of you. Lyrian swallowed hard. Because deep down, beneath the shock and the disbelief, she was starting to realize something terrifying. She wasn't powerless. She'd never been powerless. She'd just been sleeping. And now, with the Alpha King's life in her hands and the eyes of the kingdom on her, she was finally waking up. Lyrian didn't sleep that night. How could she? She'd been given a chamber, not a closet or a corner of the servants' quarters, adjoining the king's own rooms. It was small but warm, with a bed softer than anything she'd ever touched, tapestries on the walls, and a window that overlooked the moonlit gardens. It was more luxury than she'd seen in her entire life. And it terrified her. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her patched servant's dress, and stared at her hands. They looked the same as they always had, small, calloused from work, unremarkable. But she could still feel it. The light. The power. Sleeping just beneath her skin, waiting. What am I? The question circled her mind like a wolf stalking prey. She wasn't supposed to have magic. Omegas rarely did. They were nurturers, supporters, the foundation of pack life, but never the warriors or mystics. And even if she had possessed some latent ability, wouldn't someone have noticed by now? Wouldn't she have noticed? But the truth was undeniable. She'd felt it the moment she touched Eric. The poison had recoiled from her like it recognized something it feared. Something ancient. Something dangerous. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Come in, she said, her voice barely steady. The door opened, and a young woman entered, tall, with dark braided hair and warm brown eyes. She wore simple clothes, but they were well made, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. Forgive the intrusion, the woman said, offering a small smile. I'm Kea. The king asked me to attend to you. Lyrian blinked. Attend to me? Yes. To make sure you have everything you need. Kea's smile widened. And to perhaps offer you something better to wear for tomorrow's council meeting. No offense, but... She gestured gently at Lyrian's worn dress. Lyrian looked down, heat flooding her cheeks. I don't have anything else. You do now. Kea set down the bundle she'd been carrying and unfolded it to reveal a gown, simple but elegant, deep forest green with silver embroidery along the sleeves. The king insisted. Lyrian's throat tightened. He didn't have to. He wanted to. Kea's expression softened. He's different. Since you healed him. Lighter somehow. Like a weight's been lifted. She paused, then added quietly, thank you. For saving him. The kingdom would have fallen without him. I didn't, Lyrian started, then stopped. Because what could she say? That it was an accident? That she still didn't understand what she'd done? Kea didn't press. She simply laid the gown on the bed, then hesitated. May I ask you something? Lyrian nodded. Are you afraid? Of tomorrow? The question cut straight to the bone. Yes, Lyrian admitted. Terrified. Good, Kea said, surprising her. Fear means you're smart enough to understand what you're walking into. The council. She shook her head. They're not kind to those they don't understand. Especially Elder Rovan. He's been pushing for more control over the kingdom for years, and he won't like that the king suddenly has someone he trusts more than the council. But I'm not. It doesn't matter what you are or aren't, Kea interrupted gently. What matters is what they think you are. And right now, they think you're a threat. Lyrian's stomach twisted. Kea reached out and squeezed her shoulder. But you're not alone. The king protects his own. And if he's claimed you. She smiled. Then your pack. Remember that. She left before Lyrian could respond, closing the door softly behind her. Lyrian stared at the green gown for a long time. Your pack. She'd never been pack. Not really. She'd existed on the edges, tolerated but never included, useful but never valued. Now the Alpha King himself had declared her untouchable. And she had no idea if that made her safer or painted an even bigger target on her back. Morning came too quickly. Kea returned at dawn with bread, cheese, and watered wine. Eat, she'd insisted. You'll need your strength, and helped Lyrian into the green gown. It fit perfectly, hugging her small frame in ways that made her feel both exposed and strangely powerful. You look like you belong here, Kea said, fastening the silver clasp at Lyrian's shoulder. Lyrian caught her reflection in the polished bronze mirror and barely recognized herself. I don't, she whispered. Not yet, Kea agreed. But you will. The council chamber was a vast hall of stone and shadow, lit by torches that cast dancing light across the assembled faces. Long tables formed a semicircle, and at the head sat Eric, dressed in formal armor, his silver hair tied back, his expression unreadable. He looked every inch the king. Lyrian stood beside him, not behind, not hidden, but beside, and felt the weight of every gaze in the room. There were 12 council members in total. Elders, nobles, military commanders. All of them powerful. All of them watching her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Or a threat they needed to eliminate. Elder Rovan sat closest to the king, his gray beard neatly trimmed, his eyes cold. Your Majesty, he began, his voice smooth as polished stone. We are grateful beyond words to see you recovered. The kingdom rejoiced at the news. I'm sure they did, Eric said dryly. However, Rovan continued, as if Eric hadn't spoken, there are questions. About the nature of your recovery. And about the girl. Every eye shifted to Lyrian. She forced herself to breathe. Her name is Lyrian, Eric said coolly. And she saved my life when none of you could. Yes. Quite remarkable. Rovan's tone suggested he found it anything but. Which is precisely why we have concerns. The nightworm venom is notoriously resistant to all known forms of healing magic. Yet this Omega, untrained, unregistered, with no documented magical lineage, somehow expelled it entirely. He leaned forward. How? Lyrian opened her mouth, but Eric spoke first. Does it matter how? The result is what counts. With respect, Your Majesty, it matters greatly. This came from a sharp-faced woman to Rovan's left, Commander Thessa, if Lyrian remembered correctly. Unknown magic is dangerous magic. We need to understand what we're dealing with. You're dealing with someone who saved your king, Eric said, his voice dropping into a growl. Show some gratitude. We are grateful, Rovan said smoothly. But gratitude doesn't negate caution. For all we know, she could have been the one who poisoned you in the first place. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Lyrian's blood turned to ice. That's absurd, Eric snapped, rising to his feet. Kale, who'd been lying at his side, stood as well, teeth bared. She's a servant. She had no access to. Servants go everywhere, Your Majesty. They see everything. They're invisible. Rovan's gaze locked onto Lyrian. Isn't that right, girl? She wanted to shrink. To disappear. To run. But Eric's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing gently. Your pack. She lifted her chin. I didn't poison the king, she said, her voice trembling but steady. I would never. Then explain the magic, Thessa demanded. Where did it come from? I don't know. Convenient. It's the truth. Lyrian's voice cracked, frustration boiling over. I don't know what I am. I've never had magic before. I've never, she stopped, choking on the words. Rovan leaned back, his expression calculating. Perhaps a test then. To verify her claims. Eric's grip on her hand tightened. What kind of test? A simple one. If she truly has healing magic, this rare, powerful gift, then she should be able to demonstrate it. Under controlled conditions, of course. No. Eric's voice was flat. Final. Your Majesty. I said no. I won't have her treated like some animal in an arena. Then how do we know she's not a threat? Thessa asked bluntly. Because I know. Eric's silver eyes blazed. And that's enough. With respect, Your Majesty, Rovan said, his tone carefully measured. It's not. Not for the council. Not for the kingdom. We need proof that she's safe. That her magic is stable. And if I refuse? Rovan met his gaze evenly. Then the council will have no choice but to assume she's a danger. And act accordingly. The threat was clear. Lyrian felt the room closing in around her. Felt the weight of their suspicion, their fear, their barely concealed hostility. She was trapped. And Eric, powerful as he was, couldn't protect her from the entire council. Unless. I'll do it. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Eric's head snapped toward her. Lyrian. I'll do the test, she repeated, louder this time. Whatever it is. I'll prove I'm not a threat. Rovan's eyes gleamed. How noble. But on one condition. She forced herself to meet his gaze, even as her knees shook. If I pass, if I prove my magic is real and I mean no harm, then the council accepts me. No more accusations. No more tests. I'm done being interrogated. A murmur rippled through the room. Rovan exchanged glances with Thessa, then nodded slowly. Agreed. If you pass, you'll be accepted as the king's healer. If you fail. He smiled thinly. Well, we'll address that if it happens. Lyrian's heart hammered. Eric leaned close, his voice low and urgent. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she whispered back. Or they'll never stop. He studied her for a long moment, something fierce and protective burning in his eyes. Then he straightened and addressed the council. Fine. One test. But I choose the terms. And if any of you harm her in the process, I'll consider it an act of treason. Rovan inclined his head. Of course, Your Majesty. But Lyrian saw the satisfaction in his eyes. And she knew, with sinking certainty, that whatever test they had planned, it wasn't going to be simple at all. The test was set for sunset. 3 days away. Lyrian spent those days in a fog of dread and preparation. Kea brought her meals, most of which she couldn't eat. Eric checked on her constantly, his concern evident despite his attempts to hide it. And Kale, the spirit wolf, refused to leave her side, as if sensing her fear and offering silent comfort. You don't have to go through with this, Eric told her on the second day, finding her in the gardens where she'd gone to escape the suffocating walls of the castle. She was sitting on a stone bench, staring at her hands, those treacherous, glowing hands that had saved his life and doomed hers. Yes, I do, she said quietly. If I don't, they'll never trust me. And if they don't trust me, she looked up at him. They'll find a way to get rid of me. Test or no test. Eric's jaw tightened. I won't let them. You can't fight the entire council. Watch me. Despite everything, she almost smiled. You'd start a civil war over a Baron Omega? Yes. He said it without hesitation, without doubt, and the conviction in his voice made her chest ache. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Why? You barely know me. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. When I was poisoned, dying on that floor, I felt it. The poison. It wasn't just killing my body, it was devouring my soul. My wolf. Everything I was. He paused. And then you touched me. And for the first time in days, I felt light. Like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Like hope. Lyrian's breath caught. You gave that to me, he continued. And I don't care if you're Barren or Omega or invisible to the rest of this kingdom. You saved me. And that means something. She wanted to argue. To tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't worth all this trouble. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, beneath all the fear and self-doubt, a small part of her, a part she'd buried years ago, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The third day arrived too quickly. The test was to take place in the Great Hall, with the entire council present as witnesses. Lyrian dressed in the green gown again, her hands shaking so badly that Kea had to fasten the clasp. "You'll be fine," Kea said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "What if I'm not?" Lyrian whispered. "What if the magic doesn't come? What if I fail?" Kea met her eyes. "Then you run. Fast. And don't look back." It wasn't comforting. But it was honest. The Great Hall was packed. Not just with council members, but with nobles, guards, servants, anyone who could find a reason to witness the spectacle. Lyrian felt their eyes on her like brands as she walked through the crowd, Eric at her side, Kale padding behind them. Elder Rovan stood at the center of the hall, flanked by Commander Thessa and 2 other council members. In front of him was a low table, and on that table, Lyrian's stomach dropped. A man lay there. Young, maybe 20, with pale skin and shallow breaths. His chest was wrapped in bloodied bandages, and even from a distance, she could smell the infection. "This is Gavriel," Rovan announced to the crowd. "A soldier injured in a skirmish with raiders 3 days ago. His wounds have festered despite treatment. The healers say he has until dawn at most." He turned to Lyrian, his expression unreadable. "Your task is simple. Heal him. If you truly possess the gift you claim, this should be well within your abilities." Lyrian's mouth went dry. Eric stepped forward. "This isn't a fair test. She healed me by instinct, under duress." "She's never." "Then perhaps her gift only works under duress," Rovan interrupted smoothly. "Or perhaps it doesn't work at all. Either way, we'll know soon enough." Lyrian looked at the dying man, Gavriel, and felt panic claw at her throat. "I don't know how I healed Eric. It just happened. But this was different. This was controlled. Witnessed. Expected. What if she couldn't do it? What if the magic had been a fluke?" Eric's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You don't have to do this." She looked up at him, saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and felt something steady inside her. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." She approached the table. Gavriel's eyes were closed, his breathing ragged. Up close, she could see the wound, a deep gash across his ribs, inflamed and leaking pus. The healers had done what they could, but it wasn't enough. He was dying. Lyrian placed her hands on his chest, just above the bandages. Nothing happened. She closed her eyes, trying to summon the light, the warmth, the power she'd felt with Eric. Still nothing. The crowd murmured. "Perhaps she needs encouragement," Rovan said, his tone laced with mockery. Lyrian gritted her teeth and pressed harder, willing the magic to come. "Please. Please work. Please." "Pathetic," someone muttered from the crowd. "Fraud," another voice agreed. The whispers grew louder, sharper, each one a blade cutting into her resolve. And still, nothing happened. Eric moved toward her, but Kale was faster. The wolf padded up beside Lyrian and nudged her hand with his nose, those ancient blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, the world went silent. And in that silence, Lyrian felt it, the pull. The same pull that had drawn her to Eric's chamber 3 nights ago. The same certainty. You are not powerless. She took a deep breath. And instead of forcing the magic, she let go. The light came like dawn breaking. It flooded from her hands in warm, golden waves, spilling across Gavriel's chest and seeping into his wounds. The infection recoiled, just like the poison had, fleeing from her touch as if burned. The crowd gasped. Gavriel's eyes flew open, and he sucked in a sharp, clean breath. Lyrian kept her hands steady, guiding the light deeper, mending torn flesh, knitting bone, purging corruption. She could feel it, every cell, every thread of life weaving back together under her touch. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. And when she finally pulled her hands away, Gabrielle sat up, shakily, but alive, and stared at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. I can breathe, he whispered. The hall erupted. Some cheered. Some shouted questions. Others simply stared in stunned silence. Lyrian swayed on her feet, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Eric caught her before she fell. I've got you, he murmured, his arm around her waist, holding her steady. She looked up at him, dizzy and drained, and managed a weak smile. I did it. Yes, he said softly, something fierce and proud burning in his eyes. You did. Rovan stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Impressive. Very impressive. Commander Thessa nodded slowly. The gift is real. I saw it myself. As did we all, another council member agreed. Rovan turned to address the crowd. It seems we have witnessed something extraordinary. The girl, Lyrian, possesses a rare and powerful healing gift. The council acknowledges this. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. Lyrian wanted to feel relief. Wanted to believe it was over. But something in Rovan's tone, too smooth, too satisfied, made her uneasy. However, Rovan continued, such power raises new questions. Where did it come from? Why has it never manifested before? And most importantly, he turned to Lyrian, his eyes cold. Can it be controlled? Eric stiffened. We had an agreement. She passed the test. This is over. The test proved she has magic, Rovan said calmly. It didn't prove she can control it. Or that it won't overwhelm her. What are you suggesting? Eric's voice was dangerously low. Rovan spread his hands. Only that such power should be studied. Understood. For the safety of the kingdom, of course. Of course, Thessa echoed, though her gaze on Lyrian was sharp, calculating. Lyrian's heart sank. They weren't done with her. They were just getting started. That night, Eric paced his chamber like a caged wolf while Lyrian sat by the fire, too exhausted to move. They're not going to let this go, he said, his voice tight with frustration. Rovan's planning something. I can feel it. Maybe he's right, Lyrian said quietly. Eric stopped pacing. What? Maybe I should be studied. Maybe I am dangerous. Don't. He crossed to her in 2 strides, kneeling so they were eye level. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. What you did today, saving Gabrielle, that was a gift. Not a curse. But I don't understand it. I don't know where it comes from, or why, or, her voice broke. What if I lose control? What if I hurt someone? You won't. You don't know that. Yes, he said firmly, I do. Because I've seen you. The way you hesitate before acting, the way you second-guess every decision, the way you carry the weight of every unkind word anyone's ever spoken to you. He cupped her face gently. You're not reckless. You're not dangerous. You're just powerful. And that terrifies them. Tears pricked her eyes. It terrifies me too. I know. His thumb brushed her cheek. But you're not alone. Not anymore. She wanted to believe him. Gods, she wanted to. But deep down, she knew the truth. Power like hers didn't go unnoticed. Didn't go unchallenged. And the council, Rovan especially, wouldn't stop until they'd either controlled it or destroyed it. The nightmares started that same night. Lyrian woke gasping, her hands glowing faintly in the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs. The dream had been vivid, terrifyingly so. She'd seen herself standing in the great hall, light pouring from her hands uncontrollably, burning everyone it touched. Eric had been there, reaching for her, and she'd watched in horror as the light consumed him. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the glow to fade. It was just a dream. Just a dream. But it felt like a warning. A knock at her door made her jump. Lyrian? Eric's voice, muffled but concerned. Are you all right? Kale heard you cry out. She climbed out of bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and opened the door. Eric stood there in simple sleeping clothes, his silver hair loose around his shoulders, Kale at his side. I'm fine, she lied. Just a bad dream. His eyes narrowed. Your hands are glowing. She looked down and felt her stomach drop. The faint golden light still flickered beneath her skin, pulsing with her heartbeat. I don't know how to stop it, she whispered. Without hesitation, Eric took her hands in his. The moment their skin touched, the glow softened, dimmed, then faded entirely. They both stared at their joined hands. "How did you do that?" Lyrian asked. "I didn't. We did." He looked up at her, something shifting in his expression. "The bond. When you healed me, I think we connected somehow. My wolf recognizes yours. But I'm not," she stopped. "I don't have a wolf. I've never shifted. Most omegas don't. But that doesn't mean the wolf isn't there." His grip tightened gently. "What did you dream about?" She didn't want to tell him. Didn't want to admit how terrified she was of her own power. But the words spilled out anyway. "I dreamed I hurt you. That the light got out of control and I couldn't stop it," and her voice cracked. "Everyone I touched turned to ash." Eric's expression softened. "It won't happen. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He tugged her hands gently, pulling her closer. "Because you're afraid of it. And fear is control. It's the ones who aren't afraid of their power who become dangerous." She wanted to believe him. But the nightmare clung to her like smoke. "Come on," Eric said suddenly. "What?" "You're not going to sleep after that. Neither am I. So come on." He released one of her hands, but kept hold of the other, leading her out of the chamber. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you can breathe." He took her to the roof. Castle Valoran had a high tower with a flat stone platform that overlooked the entire kingdom. The night sky spread above them, thick with stars, and the moon hung low and full, bathing everything in silver light. "I come here when I can't sleep," Eric said, settling on the edge of the platform, legs dangling over the side. "When the crown feels too heavy." Lyrian sat beside him carefully, acutely aware of the drop below. "Do you regret it? Being king?" "Sometimes." He was quiet for a moment. "Most of the time, actually. I didn't ask for this. My father died when I was 16, too young to rule, too stubborn to refuse. The council tried to control me for years. Some of them still do. Like Rovan. Especially Rovan." His jaw tightened. "He wants power without responsibility. He'd rather rule through me than earn his own throne." "Why don't you remove him?" Eric laughed, a bitter sound. "Because he has allies. Half the council, most of the nobility. If I move against him without cause, I'll fracture the kingdom." He glanced at her. "Which is why he's being careful with you. He can't attack you directly without appearing cruel. So he'll undermine you. Make the kingdom doubt you. Fear you." Lyrian's stomach twisted. "So what do I do?" "You prove him wrong. Every single day." Eric's gaze returned to the stars. "Show them you're not dangerous. That your power is a gift, not a curse. And if I can't?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to her, and the intensity in his silver eyes stole her breath. "Then I'll stand between you and anyone who tries to harm you. Even if it means burning the council to ash." She believed him. And that terrified her almost as much as her own power. They sat in silence for a while, the night wrapping around them like a cloak. Lyrian found herself relaxing for the first time in days, the tension slowly bleeding from her shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Anything. Why don't you have a mate?" The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. But once it was out, she realized she genuinely wanted to know. Eric's expression grew distant. "I did. Once." Her heart clenched. "What happened?" "She died. During the Northern Wars, 5 years ago." His voice was flat, carefully neutral. "An ambush. She was a warrior, fierce, brilliant, unstoppable. Until she wasn't." "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but she could see the pain beneath the gesture. "It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt less." "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." Silence fell again, heavier this time. "The council's been pressuring me to choose a new mate," he said eventually. "For years. They say the kingdom needs an heir, stability, all the usual arguments." He smiled without humor. "But I can't. Every time I consider it, I just feel empty. Like I'd be betraying her memory." Lyrian's chest ached for him. "You don't owe the council anything. Especially not that." "I owe the kingdom everything." He looked at her. "But you're right. Some things shouldn't be decided by duty." She didn't know what to say to that. So she simply stayed quiet, her shoulder brushing his, offering silent comfort the way Kale had offered it to her. After a while, Eric spoke again. What about you? Have you ever wanted to find a mate? Lyrian laughed, a short, bitter sound. Who would want a Baron Omega? I'm worth less than livestock to most wolves. That's not true, isn't it? She met his gaze. I can't give a mate children. Can't continue a bloodline. Can't fulfill the one purpose Omegas are supposed to have. So, what good am I? Eric's expression hardened. You saved my life. You healed a dying man. You have a gift so rare, so powerful, that the council is terrified of you. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You're worth more than you know, Lyrian. And anyone who says otherwise is a fool. Her breath caught. For a moment, the space between them felt charged, electric. His hand lingered near her face, his silver eyes searching hers. Then Kale huffed, a sound that was almost like laughter, and the moment broke. Eric cleared his throat and pulled back, though a faint smile tugged at his lips. We should get some sleep. The council will want another meeting tomorrow. Of course they will, Lyrian muttered. But as they climbed down from the tower, her hand still warm from where he'd touched her, she realized something had shifted between them. Something fragile and precious and terrifying. And she had no idea what to do about it. The next morning brought exactly what Eric had predicted, another summons to the council. This time, though, Rovan wasn't alone. He'd brought reinforcements, 3 scholars from the royal archives, each one gray-haired and severe, each one carrying stacks of ancient texts. Your Majesty, Rovan began, his tone formal, we've been researching Lyrian's abilities. And we've found something quite remarkable. Eric's eyes narrowed. I'm listening. One of the scholars stepped forward, a woman with sharp features and ink-stained fingers. There are legends, Your Majesty, of wolves born with the gift of undoing. Healers so powerful they could unmake curses, dispel ancient magic, even reverse death itself. Lyrian's blood ran cold. They were called Moonchosen, the scholar continued. Blessed by the first wolves. But the gift came at a price. Their bodies would close, sealing their wombs to prevent the power from passing to offspring and overwhelming future generations. The room went deathly silent. Lyrian felt every eye turn to her. You're saying she's Moonchosen? Eric's voice was carefully controlled. It's the only explanation that fits, Rovan said. The healing ability. The way the poison recoiled from her. And he paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. Her barrenness. Lyrian's hands clenched into fists. I'm not. The Moonchosen were rare, the scholar interrupted, her tone almost reverent. Only a handful existed in all of recorded history. They were considered sacred. Protectors of the pack. They were also dangerous, another scholar added grimly. According to the texts, if a Moonchosen lost control of their power, the light could burn entire cities, turn forests to ash, unravel the fabric of magic itself. Commander Thessa leaned forward. So you're saying she's a walking catastrophe waiting to happen? I'm saying, Rovan said smoothly, that we need to take precautions. For the safety of the kingdom. Eric rose to his feet, his voice dropping into a growl. What kind of precautions? Training, Rovan said. Under the supervision of the council. She needs to learn to control her gift before it controls her. And if I refuse? Lyrian asked, her voice shaking. Rovan's gaze was cold. Then the council will have no choice but to consider you a threat. And act accordingly. The trap snapped shut around her. Eric looked ready to tear Rovan apart, his hands clenched, Kale growling low beside him. But Lyrian placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. I'll do it, she said quietly. Lyrian. I'll train. She met Rovan's gaze, refusing to flinch. But on one condition. The king oversees the training. Not the council. If I'm going to learn control, I'll do it with someone I trust. Rovan's expression flickered, just for a moment, with frustration. But he recovered quickly. Agreed, he said. The king may oversee. But the council will monitor progress. It wasn't a victory. But it was the best she was going to get. After the meeting, Eric pulled her aside, his expression stormy. You shouldn't have agreed to that. I had no choice, she said tiredly. They were going to force it anyway. At least this way, you're involved. They're going to try to turn you into a weapon, he said bluntly. Or a tool. Or both. I know. She met his gaze. But maybe they're right. Maybe I do need to learn control. Before I hurt someone. Eric's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled her into a sudden, fierce embrace. I won't let them break you, he murmured against her hair. Lyrian closed her eyes, breathing in his scent pine and steel and smoke. I won't let them, he repeated. She wanted to believe him. But deep down, she wondered if even the Alpha King could protect her from what was coming. The training began at dawn. Lyrian stood in the center of the castle courtyard, her breath misting in the cold morning air, while Eric circled her slowly. Kale sat at the edge of the training circle, watching with those ancient blue eyes. Around them, guards practiced drills, servants hurried past with supplies, and most uncomfortably Elder Rovan and Commander Thessa observed from a raised platform, their expressions unreadable. Ignore them, Eric said quietly, stopping in front of her. Focus on me. Easier said than done. Lyrian could feel their stares like brands on her skin. The first thing you need to understand, Eric continued, is that your power responds to emotion. Fear made it flare when you had the nightmare. Desperation made it work when you healed me. Even your calm moments, like on the roof, it settled because you settled. So I just need to stay calm? Lyrian asked doubtfully. Not calm. Centered. He placed a hand over his chest, then gestured to her. Your power isn't separate from you. It's part of you. Like breathing. You don't think about breathing, you just do it. Your healing should be the same. That's not exactly helpful advice. A faint smile tugged at his lips. I know. But it's the truth. He stepped closer. Close your eyes. She hesitated, hyper-aware of the watching council members, then obeyed. Now breathe, Eric instructed. Deep. Steady. Feel your heartbeat. She did. Felt the thrum of blood through her veins, the rise and fall of her chest, the ground solid beneath her feet. Good. Now reach for the light. Don't force it. Just invite it. Lyrian tried. She imagined the golden warmth pooling in her chest, spreading outward. Nothing happened. She opened her eyes, frustration bubbling up. It's not working. Because you're trying too hard. Eric circled her again. You're thinking of it as something you have to do. But it's something you have to be. That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't it? He stopped in front of her. When you healed me, were you thinking about technique? About control? No. I was just desperate. Exactly. You felt it. You didn't think it. His silver eyes held hers. So feel it now. She wanted to argue, to tell him this was impossible, that she couldn't just summon magic on command. But something in his gaze, steady, patient, believing, made her try again. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and instead of reaching for the power, she simply acknowledged it. I know you're there. I'm not afraid of you. The light tasted bitter even in her own mind. She was afraid. Terrified, actually. But she tried again. I know you're there. And I'm learning to trust you. A flicker. Faint. Barely perceptible. But there. Good, Eric murmured. Now hold it. Don't let it grow. Just let it exist. Lyrian focused on the tiny spark of light in her chest, keeping it small, contained. It wanted to spread. She could feel the pull, but she held firm. Sweat beaded on her forehead. That's enough, Eric said gently. Let it go. She released the power, and it faded immediately, leaving her drained but exhilarated. I did it, she whispered. You did. Pride flickered in his eyes. Small steps. But steps. From the platform, Rovan called out, impressive. But can she heal with that kind of control? Eric's expression hardened. She will. Give her time. Time is a luxury we may not have, Your Majesty. Rovan descended from the platform, his robes sweeping the ground. The northern clans are growing restless. If they perceive weakness, they'll perceive strength, Eric interrupted coldly. Because they'll see their king standing with a moon-chosen healer. Something no other pack can claim. Rovan's eyes narrowed. Unless that healer becomes a liability. She won't. For all our sakes, I hope you're right. The threat hung in the air like smoke. The training continued for days. Then weeks. Lyrian learned to summon the light at will, to hold it steady, to direct it with precision. She practiced on small wounds, cuts, bruises, minor infections, gradually building her confidence. Eric was with her every step. Patient when she failed, encouraging when she succeeded, protective when the council pushed too hard. And slowly, something shifted between them. It started with small things. The way his hand would linger on her shoulder after a session. The way she found herself seeking his presence when the castle felt too overwhelming. The way Kale had taken to sleeping at the foot of her bed, as if claiming her as pack. The way they'd catch themselves staring at each other, only to look away quickly, hearts racing. Kea noticed first. "You're falling for him," she said one evening, helping Lyrian out of her training clothes. Lyrian's cheeks flamed. "I'm not." "Yes, you are." Kea smiled knowingly. "And he's falling for you too. Everyone can see it." "That's ridiculous. He's the Alpha King." "I'm the woman who saved his life. The moon-chosen healer. The only person in this entire castle he trusts completely." Kea's expression softened. "You're not just anything anymore, Lyrian. When are you going to accept that?" Lyrian didn't have an answer. Because accepting that she might be worthy of someone like Eric, felt more dangerous than any magic. The turning point came 3 weeks into training. Lyrian had been working on healing larger wounds, pushing herself harder each day. She'd successfully mended a guard's broken arm, closed a deep gash on a servant's leg, even eased the chronic pain of an elderly cook. Each success felt like a small victory. Each success also drew more attention. The moon-chosen healer, people whispered when she passed. The king's miracle, others murmured. Some looks were admiring. Others were envious. And a few, from certain council members and nobles, were calculating. Rovan watched everything with those cold, patient eyes. And then, on a gray morning thick with mist, everything changed. A rider thundered into the courtyard, his horse lathered and wild-eyed, his face pale with terror. "Raiders," he shouted, half falling from his mount. "Northern clans, they've attacked the border villages. Dozens wounded, maybe dead. They need healers now." The courtyard erupted into chaos. Eric was already moving, barking orders to the guards, calling for horses and supplies. Rovan appeared at his side. "Your Majesty, you can't go yourself. It could be a trap." "I don't care." Eric's voice was steel. "My people are dying. I'm going." "Then take your moon-chosen." Rovan's gaze flicked to Lyrian. "This is what she's been training for, isn't it?" Eric hesitated, his eyes finding hers across the courtyard. Lyrian's heart hammered. She'd healed cuts and bruises, infections and broken bones. But battle wounds? Mass casualties? What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? But she thought of the dying villagers, of the pain and fear they must be feeling. And she thought of Eric's words on the roof, "You're worth more than you know." She straightened her shoulders and walked toward him. "I'm coming," she said firmly. Eric studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Stay close to me. Don't take risks. And if things get dangerous, you run." "Understood." "Understood." But they both knew she was lying. The ride to the border took 2 hours at a brutal pace. By the time they arrived, smoke was still rising from burned cottages, and the sounds of grief filled the air. Bodies lay scattered in the streets, some villagers, some raiders. And in the center of what had once been a peaceful square, the wounded huddled together, moaning, bleeding, dying. Lyrian's stomach turned. There were so many. Too many. "Start with the worst cases," Eric ordered, already moving to organize the guards. "We'll hold the perimeter in case they come back." Lyrian nodded mutely and approached the first wounded person, a young woman with a gash across her stomach, her face pale and sweating. "Please," the woman whispered. "Please help me." Lyrian placed her hands on the wound and summoned the light. It came easily now, flooding through her like warm water, seeping into torn flesh and shattered bone. The woman gasped as the wound knitted closed, color returning to her face. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you." But Lyrian was already moving to the next person. And the next. And the next. She lost track of time. Lost track of how many people she healed. Her hands moved on instinct, the light flowing endlessly, her entire world narrowing to wound after wound after wound. Her body screamed for rest. Her magic flickered, threatening to fade. But she kept going. Because they needed her. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't useless. And then she saw him. A child. No more than 7 years old, pinned beneath a collapsed beam, his leg twisted at a horrible angle, his eyes glazed with shock. "Help," he whimpered. "Help me." Lyrian dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking with exhaustion. The injury was bad. Worse than anything she'd healed before. Shattered bone, severed muscle, massive internal bleeding. "I don't know if I can." "You can." Eric's voice, sudden and steady behind her. He knelt beside her, one hand on her shoulder. "I'm here. You can do this." She looked at him, at the absolute faith in his silver eyes, and felt something settle inside her. She placed her hands on the child's leg and poured everything she had into the healing. The light blazed brighter than it ever had before, so bright it hurt to look at, so intense it made the air shimmer. The child's leg straightened. The bone knitted. The bleeding stopped. And when Lyrian finally pulled her hands away, the boy sat up, whole and unharmed, and stared at her like she descended from the moon itself. "Moonchosen," someone whispered in awe. The word spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Moonchosen. The king's moonchosen healer." Lyrian swayed, utterly spent, and Eric caught her before she fell. "I've got you," he murmured, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest, to tell him she could walk, but her body wouldn't cooperate. So she simply rested her head against his chest and let him carry her. Behind them, the villagers knelt, one by one, then in groups, then all at once, bowing to the woman who'd saved them. And Lyrian realized, with dizzying clarity, that everything had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't useless anymore. She was the Moonchosen. And there was no going back. The journey back to Castle Valoran felt different. Lyrian rode beside Eric now, not behind him, not hidden among the guards, but beside him. The villagers they'd saved lined the road as they passed, bowing, whispering prayers, reaching out to touch the hem of her cloak as if she were something sacred. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt terrifying. "They're treating you like a saint," Eric murmured, his horse keeping pace with hers. "I'm not." Her voice was hoarse from exhaustion. "I'm just me. Not anymore." His expression was unreadable. "You saved an entire village. Word will spread. By the time we reach the castle, every pack in the realm will have heard about the Moonchosen healer who brought the dead back from the brink." "I didn't bring anyone back from the dead." "Close enough." He glanced at her, something fierce burning in his eyes. "You're a legend now, Lyrian. Whether you want to be or not." She didn't. She desperately didn't. But she could already see the weight of it settling on her shoulders like a cloak made of chains. They arrived at the castle as the sun was setting, painting the stone walls in shades of blood and gold. The courtyard was packed, word had indeed spread, and the crowd erupted into cheers when they saw her. The Moonchosen. The king's healer. Lyrian's hands tightened on the reins. Elder Rovan stood at the entrance, flanked by the council, his expression carefully neutral. But his eyes, cold, calculating, told a different story. Eric dismounted first, then helped Lyrian down. Her legs nearly buckled, but his hands steadied her. "Stay close," he murmured. She nodded. Rovan stepped forward, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Your Majesty, we heard of your victory at the border. The kingdom rejoices." "It wasn't a victory," Eric said bluntly. "People died. But Lyrian saved many more who would have been lost." "Indeed." Rovan's gaze shifted to her. "Remarkable. Truly remarkable." The Moonchosen proves her worth yet again. There was something in his tone, something that made Lyrian's skin prickle. "The council requests an audience," Rovan continued. "At your earliest convenience, of course." "Tomorrow," Eric said firmly. "Tonight we rest." Rovan inclined his head. "Of course, Your Majesty." But as they passed him, Lyrian caught the briefest flicker of something in his expression. Not anger. Not even frustration. Satisfaction. And that scared her more than anything. That night, Lyrian couldn't sleep. She paced her chamber, her mind racing, her hands still tingling with residual magic. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the wounded, heard their screams, felt their pain flowing into her as she healed them. She'd saved them. She knew that. But the weight of it, the responsibility, the expectation, was crushing. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "It's me," Eric's voice, quiet but steady. She opened the door to find him standing there, still in his traveling clothes, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Kale sat at his side, tail thumping once in greeting. "I thought you might not be sleeping," he said. "I can't." She stepped aside, letting him enter. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there. Seeing all that blood, all that pain." "I know." He crossed to the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. "It doesn't get easier. The first time I led men into battle, I was 17. We won. And I spent the entire night vomiting because I couldn't stop seeing the faces of the people I'd killed." Lyrian moved to stand beside him. "How did you learn to live with it?" "By remembering why I did it." He looked at her. "I killed to protect. You healed to save. The weight is different, but the purpose is the same. We do what we must for the people who depend on us. But what if I can't bear it? What if the weight becomes too much? Then you lean on the people who care about you." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You're not alone in this, Lyrian. Not anymore." The warmth of his touch spread through her, steadying her racing heart. "The council's going to use this, aren't they?" she said quietly. "What happened today? They're going to demand more from me." Eric's jaw tightened. "Probably. Rovin's been too quiet since you proved your power. He's planning something." "What do I do?" "You stand your ground." He squeezed her hand. "You're not their tool. You're not their weapon. You're Lyrian, the woman who saved my life. And no one, not Rovin, not the council, not anyone gets to dictate what you do with your gift." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to find that same strength he seemed to see in her. But she was so tired. So scared. "Eric," she whispered. "What if I'm not strong enough for this?" He turned to face her fully, his free hand cupping her cheek. "You're the strongest person I know. You just don't see it yet." Their faces were inches apart now. Close enough that she could feel his breath on her skin, see the silver flecks in his eyes catching the moonlight. "I see you," he murmured. "All of you. Not the moon chosen. Not the healer. Just Lyrian. And you're extraordinary." Her breath caught. And then, slowly, giving her time to pull away, time to refuse, he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, as if he were afraid she might break. But Lyrian didn't break. She melted. Her free hand fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened. 7 years of invisibility, of being unwanted and dismissed and forgotten, shattered in that single moment. Someone wanted her. Someone saw her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Eric rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered, though he made no move to step away. "Why not?" "Because you're vulnerable right now. Exhausted. And I don't want you to think. I don't think anything except that I wanted you to." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I've wanted this for a long time. Since the moment you helped me pick up those broken goblets." A smile, genuine, unguarded, broke across his face. "That was years ago. I know. You never said anything. How could I? You were the Alpha King. I was nothing. You were never nothing." His thumb brushed her cheek. "And you're not just something now. You're everything." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, with promise, with possibility. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, Lyrian felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The council meeting the next morning shattered that hope like glass. Rovin wasted no time with pleasantries. The moment Eric and Lyrian entered the chamber, he launched his attack. "Your Majesty, the council has been discussing recent events. And we've come to a decision." Eric's expression hardened. "What decision?" The Moon Chosen is too valuable to risk. Rovin's tone was measured, reasonable. She should remain here, at the castle, under protection. Available to heal the royal family and high-ranking officials, but not sent into dangerous situations. No, Eric said flatly. Your Majesty. I said no. Lyrian heals who she chooses, when she chooses. She's not your prisoner. We're not suggesting imprisonment, Commander Thessa interjected. We're suggesting protection. If she were killed or captured, the kingdom would lose its greatest asset. I'm not an asset, Lyrian said, finding her voice despite her shaking hands. I'm a person. A person with extraordinary power, Rovin countered. Power that belongs to the kingdom. Power that belongs to me, Lyrian shot back, anger flaring. Not to you. Not to the council. To me. Rovin's eyes narrowed. Careful, girl. You've risen far, but you can fall just as quickly. Threaten her again, Eric growled, and I'll have you removed from this council permanently. On what grounds? Insubordination. Treason. Take your pick. The room went deathly silent. Then Rovin smiled, a cold, calculated thing that made Lyrian's blood run cold. Very well, Your Majesty. If you won't listen to reason, perhaps you'll listen to this. He gestured to one of the scholars, who stepped forward carrying an ancient tome. We found something else in our research. Something troubling. Eric's hand found Lyrian's, squeezing in warning. The scholar opened the book, her voice trembling slightly as she read. The Moon Chosen were blessed with extraordinary power, yes. But the blessing was not without risk. According to these texts, if a Moon Chosen forms a mate bond, the power can transfer. Lyrian's heart stopped. Transfer. Eric's voice was dangerously quiet. To the mate, the scholar confirmed. Creating what the ancients called a light-bound pair. Two souls sharing one gift. It amplifies the power exponentially, but also. She hesitated. It makes them dangerous. Unstable. Several light-bound pairs in history went mad from the intensity of the bond, destroying everything around them. Rovin leaned forward. Which is why, for the safety of the kingdom, we must insist that the Moon Chosen remains unmated. Permanently. The words hit like a physical blow. Lyrian felt Eric's hand tighten around hers, felt his entire body go rigid with fury. You have no right, he started. We have every right. Rovin's composure finally cracked, his voice rising. You may be king, but you are not above the safety of this realm. If you form a bond with her, you could doom us all. That's convenient, Eric snarled. You want her power, but not her happiness. You want to lock her in a cage and use her as a tool. We want to protect the kingdom. You want to control it. Admit it, you're terrified that if she bonds with me, you'll lose whatever leverage you think you have. Your Majesty, please. But Eric had heard enough. He rose to his feet, pulling Lyrian with him, his voice echoing through the chamber. This council meeting is over. Lyrian stays with me. She heals who she wants, lives how she wants, and bonds with whoever she chooses. And if anyone tries to stop her, they'll answer to me. He turned and stormed out, Lyrian stumbling to keep up, Kale at their heels. Behind them, the council erupted into chaos. But Lyrian barely heard it, because all she could think about was the word mate, and the realization that Eric had just declared, in front of the entire council, that he wanted her as his. They didn't speak until they reached his chambers. The moment the door closed behind them, Eric rounded on her, his expression wild, desperate. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have, I had no right to assume. Do you mean it? Lyrian interrupted, her voice shaking. He stopped. What? Do you want me as your mate? The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Eric crossed her in 3 strides, cupping her face in his hands. Yes, he said fiercely. God's help me, yes. I know it's insane. I know we barely know each other. I know the council will fight it. But I don't care. Because when I'm with you, I feel alive again. Like the part of me that died with my first mate has finally started healing. And if that makes me selfish, if that makes me reckless, then so be it. I want you, Lyrian. Not as a healer. Not as the Moon Chosen. As mine. Tears streamed down her face. But what if they're right? What if bonding with me is dangerous? Then we'll face it together. His thumb brushed her tears away. I'd rather risk everything with you than have nothing without you. It was the most terrifying, exhilarating thing anyone had ever said to her. And she realized, with perfect clarity, what her answer was. Yes, she whispered. Eric's eyes widened. Yes, yes. I want to be your mate. Her voice broke. I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop feeling like I don't deserve this. I want to be yours. Completely. The kiss was different this time. Not gentle. Not tentative. Desperate. Claiming. Absolute. And as their lips met, as his arms wrapped around her and pulled her close, Lyrian felt something inside her shift. The light in her chest blazed brighter, reaching out, finding an answering warmth in Eric. His wolf, she realized. Recognizing hers. Calling to it. Golden light erupted around them, bathing the room in radiance so intense it was blinding. The mate bond snapped into place. And suddenly, Lyrian could feel everything. His heartbeat, perfectly synced with hers. His emotions, love, fierce and protective. His soul, intertwined with hers so deeply it was like they'd always been one. When the light finally faded, they stood wrapped in each other's arms, both breathing hard, both glowing faintly. What? Eric's voice was hoarse. What was that? The bond, Lyrian whispered. We're lightbound now. He should have looked terrified. Should have regretted it. Instead, he smiled, bright and genuine and utterly unafraid. Good, he said simply. And kissed her again. The council, predictably, lost their minds. Rovan stormed into the throne room the next morning, his face purple with rage, half the council at his heels. You've doomed us, he shouted at Eric. You've bonded with the Moonchosen and doomed the entire kingdom. Eric sat on his throne, Lyrian at his side, not below him, not behind him, but beside him on a seat the servants had frantically placed there overnight. Kale lay at their feet, and both of them glowed faintly with residual light from the bond. Have I? Eric's voice was calm, almost amused. Because from where I'm sitting, I feel more powerful than I ever have. Stronger. Clearer. More in control. For now, Rovan snarled. But the madness will come. It always does. Will it? Lyrian spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Or did the madness come from people like you, trying to control what they didn't understand? Trying to cage power instead of embracing it? Rovan's eyes blazed. How dare you? I dare because I'm done being afraid of you. She stood, the light within her pulsing in time with Eric's. You wanted to lock me away. Use me. Control me. But I'm not a tool. I'm not a weapon. I'm the Moonchosen. And I choose to stand with my mate. If that scares you, that's your problem. Not mine. Commander Thessa stepped forward, her expression conflicted. Your Majesty. Lyrian, we're trying to protect the kingdom. Then stop trying to control us, Eric said firmly. Because we're not your enemy. We're your hope. Lyrian and I, bonded, are stronger than either of us alone. Strong enough to protect this kingdom from any threat. Strong enough to heal what's been broken. Strong enough to lead. But what if? What if nothing? Eric's voice hardened. This is happening. We are lightbound. And you will accept it. Or you will leave my council. The ultimatum hung in the air. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Commander Thessa knelt. I accept it, Your Majesty. One by one, other council members followed. Some reluctantly. Some with obvious fear. But they knelt. All except Rovan. He stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists, fury radiating from every pore. You're making a mistake, he said coldly. No, Eric replied. I'm making a choice. And if you can't support it, you know where the door is. For a heartbeat, Lyrian thought Rovan might lunge at them. Might try something desperate and violent. But then his gaze flicked to Kale, now standing, teeth bared, and to the light, still glowing faintly around the light-bound pair. He turned and left without another word. The remaining council rose, murmuring among themselves, but the fight had gone out of them. It was over. They'd won. That night, Lyrian stood on the castle roof with Eric, just like they had weeks ago. But everything was different now. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't useless anymore. She was moon-chosen, light-bound, mated to the Alpha King. And most impossibly of all, she was happy. Do you regret it? Eric asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Bonding with me? Taking on all this responsibility? Lyrian leaned into him, feeling their bond hum contentedly. Not for a second. Even though the council will probably fight us for years? Even then. Even though there will always be people who fear your power? Let them fear. She looked up at him, this fierce, protective, impossible man who'd seen her when no one else did. As long as you're beside me, I can face anything. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made her heart skip, and kissed her forehead. Good. Because I'm never leaving your side again. Below them, the kingdom sprawled in moonlit silver. Somewhere out there, people slept peacefully because she'd healed them. Because she'd saved them. Because she'd finally embraced the power she'd been too afraid to claim. The Barren Omega was gone. In her place stood the moon-chosen, light-bound to her king, and ready to change the fate of the entire realm. Lyrian smiled, golden light flickering faintly around her fingers as Eric's hand found hers. The journey had been terrifying, painful, impossible. But she'd done it. She'd saved the dying Alpha King. She'd saved herself. And in doing so, she'd found something she never thought she'd have. A place to belong, a power to embrace, and a love worth fighting for. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.